So Gary Neville has been discussing Trent Alexander-Arnold's future, saying he might want to do a David Beckham and leave his boyhood club for Real Madrid. I sat down with Paul Gorst from the Liverpool Echo to discuss that as a possibility and the potential fallout of Trent to Madrid. Let's do a little bit on the inevitable contract stuff, which always will loom until it won't. Gary Neville's been talking about Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Is he being complimentary this time?
No, he's causing trouble because it's Gary Neville. Because ultimately, what he wants is all the bad things that happen to Manchester United to be the same as things that are happening to Liverpool. So he wants FSG to be the Glazers, and he wants Klopp to be Fergie, and therefore it to fall off a cliff when he leaves. And he wants, I think secretly, Trent Alexander-Arnold to move to Real Madrid, just like David Beckham. He said he may feel that his appreciation levels would go up in Europe in certain different types of football than they would in this country. He's struggling to break into the England team. That tells you there's still a lot of question marks. Slots taken off in certain games this season. So did Klopp. He's in bed in Liverpool. He's one of their own. But David Beckham was at Manchester United with me and loved Manchester United. His family, his mum and dad, massive United fans, adored everything about the club, but he wanted to explore the world and Europe. I don't think it's a terrible point to make, because obviously right now we know the Real Madrid interest seems to be looming overhead. He still hasn't signed a contract. He's 26 years old. If he's wanted by that team, Jude Bellingham's there, so he's got that sort of connection there. We know he's good friends with him. Yeah, it's a reasonable point to make, but it's all going to add to the fear factor around Trent's future, really.
Yeah, I think of the three, this is the one that Liverpool fans need to be most concerned about. He's the only one who has interest from elsewhere that we know of, that we see speculated on. Obviously, the sort of Saudi stuff never really goes too far away with Mo Salah, but we know that Real Madrid, biggest club in Europe, pretty much it's all starting to come out from the Spanish media, isn't it, that they want him to. I mean, they've just signed Kylian Mbappe on a free transfer, so I'm sure that they feel that they can get Trent Alexander-Arnold to do the same. Yeah, the longer it goes on, the more it becomes a worry for Liverpool, and it hasn't been of Richard Hughes' making, all this mess, all this contract uncertainty. It's been sort of, a snowball effect of 2 years of FSG perhaps exploring their options quietly about maybe selling the club, the lack of a sporting director in place, Klopp's influence, and then decision to walk away. There's been lots of factors that have sort of contributed towards this storyline, or these three storylines sort of emerging over the last 6 to 8 months. But I think it's almost a situation that could define Hughes' tenure as a sporting director, if that's not being a bit too dramatic or sort of judging him a bit early. I think whatever happens here with Liverpool's three most important outfielders is going to be huge. And I think I've said for a while, I could play. I've played devil's advocate, and I could see a world in where Trent wants to go and play for the biggest club in Spain alongside Barcelona, obviously, in a team who were always going to be competing for La Liga, for the Champions League. And people like Neville, the critiquing of his defending just sort of goes away overnight, because you only see the good bits, you only see the highlights, the clips on Twitter, the passes, the assists, all that sort of stuff. And of course, there will be intense spotlights on him from media in Spain and all that sort of stuff, but from a kind of, an English media point of view, I think all of that criticism and all that debate almost just falls silent if he goes to Real Madrid.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The devil's advocacy side of things is right, is that I can understand it. If you take away the connection to Liverpool Football Club, I can understand why Trent would want to do it, because for a start, like Real Madrid come knocking, they don't come knocking loads, and they come knocking for a very certain type of profile footballer, and that is to say very good footballers. They don't come knocking, with the exception of that time Thomas Gravesen signed for Madrid, back in the day. Good midfielder though he was, he certainly wasn't a Galactico. So there's obviously there'll be a law there, there'll be an ego boost to being demanded. You've got Carlo Ancelotti, arguably the greatest football manager of all time. You've got, as Kylian Mbappe, he's just run the ire of an entire nation to leave Paris Saint-Germain on a free to go and make that move. You mentioned Bellingham's already in there. There's a ton of up and coming talent in there as well, and Trent, that must, his eyes must light up at that. And you're right, the scrutiny thing. I just don't think that defensive scrutiny stuff is ever going to go away. He could have an absolute, because I remember this with Glenn Johnson and how people say Glenn Johnson can't defend, and then there was a period of like a year or so where Glenn Johnson was flawless defensively. But it never went away.
Yeah.
People always just assumed it'd come back. And then when he has a bad game, it's like, there you go. So it's a stigma he's never going to lose. But we're starting to see now, it's November, it's coming out in the media more and more of this trend. But do you think he's playing a bit of a game online, as well? Like some of the social postings from him and his team. There's a picture of him and Xabi Alonso without comment from the week, which could be construed in any kind of number of ways. Start to see some negativity in the ground towards him. Not loads, but it's there. I don't think he gets away from Liverpool clean, is my concern.
No. I think that the fans' attitudes, I'm hesitant to speak for an entire fan base, but I'd like to sort of canvass more opinion on this. But I think, just my opinion, I think if all three were to leave this summer, I think Van Dijk and Salah, there's a backlash towards the club from the fans on how have you let this happen. With Alexander-Arnold, I think it's more aimed at the player because, rightly or wrongly, because he's 6-7 years younger, he's Liverpool born, he's the one who's the most valuable if all three players were on 5-year deals. I think it's going to be a really interesting situation, see how it's handled from both sides. I think Trent is absolutely determined not to appear in any way disrespectful while this sort of impasse is ongoing. So we'll see. Just
to swing it back to the Beckham thing, though, I can't speak for how Manchester United fans reacted at the time. They certainly wouldn't have openly accepted that. They wouldn't have been made up with it. But there had been sort of signs in the build-up. Obviously, there's a famous cut eyebrow when Alex Ferguson kicks the boot and it hits him in the face. And he'd become this national star by that point. So there was this general sense that he'd almost become bigger than Manchester United. So there becomes a little bit of an acceptance in that regard. That's the odd thing I think about Trent is that, and it might speak to him being undervalued a bit in this country and a bit by Liverpool, that people are a bit like, well, what are you doing? Whereas he is more than good enough to go and be a superstar at Real Madrid because he's already a superstar at one of the best clubs, if not the best club in Europe already. But yeah, it does feel like I can see it from a personal perspective. I can look at it and go, he's won everything at Liverpool. His boyhood club. This is not Gerrard who's given up on the opportunity when Chelsea come calling to try and win a league with Liverpool. He's won a league with Liverpool. He's won a European Cup with Liverpool. He's won everything you can win with Liverpool. I can appreciate that he might want to try something new. I just don't think that's something that Liverpool fans, en masse in particular in this city, I don't think it's going to sit comfortably. No. And he runs the risk of actually tarnishing his reputation within the city as well. Yeah,
there is certainly a big element of that. But also as well, I think the way Liverpool operate as a club, by the ownership model, they can't afford to be letting £100 million plus players go for nothing. If he was to leave, say he's got 3 years left on his deal now and he leaves this summer and Real Madrid pay a transfer fee for him. It's obviously done with a heavy heart. It's done reluctantly. Fans don't really want to see him go, but that money would be there to be reinvested. Yeah. Seeing him leave for nothing would be difficult to take for supporters. But on the flip side, again, to sort of further play devil's advocate, I think if Alexander-Arnold was sort of waiting to see what this new era looked like, I think he's got a decent enough sample size now to think, this could actually go really well. The top of the Champions League, the top of the Premier League. They've been superb defensively. They're sort of growing into every game, looking like a really strong side. Great squad with players to come back from injuries. It can't really have gone much better than what he would have hoped for. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not like Real Madrid are flying at the moment as such, but no, it is. It's so mad. Just lastly on it, I've just got this inkling because of the Mbappe stuff. It's now a path travelled. Yeah. There's now an example you can point to of just stick it out, mate. Stick it out and you'll come to us. And I just wonder whether Real Madrid are putting a little influence in there, because you're dead right. The smart move from all angles, really, if he doesn't want to play for Liverpool anymore, is to sign a deal, and then let Liverpool make a deal with Real Madrid. But Real Madrid won't be encouraging that, because ultimately it's going to cost them a hell of a lot more money to pay for Trent, and then pay his sign-on fee, and then pay his wage. It does make you wonder whether something's going on behind the scenes. We've seen it happen again with Mbappe, where maybe they're saying, we're not having you, and then that almost puts, once again, it's both clubs now putting it on Trent.
Yeah, I mean, the budget will be there for more wages if he goes on a free transfer. I mean, that's just, simple economics, really. It's the worrying thing for me is all this talk of, like you were saying there, about maybe private conversations and all that sort of stuff, but they're less than 2 months away from being able to speak to him freely, free of any sort of outcry from Liverpool or anything like that, any talk of tapping up. And the longer it goes on, it's becoming a little bit of a terrifying situation for Liverpool supporters, not least because they're going to lose one of the most talented players they've got, but also the fact that they're losing for nothing. And then how do you replace him? You can't say Conor Bradley could come in. Yeah, great. He's going to have a brilliant future, but you're £100 million down on what you'd like to do elsewhere in other positions. So yeah, it's this is the biggest concern of the three, and the longer it goes on, the less likely it's looking like a resolution.